A winter unlike anything we've experienced.
It's pretty wild.
A parade of winter storms flooding the Bay Area.
If you told me this was going to occur, never.
Putting streets, homes, and livelihoods underwater.
You saw all buildings taking damages, glass getting broke out, the walk split in half.
The country is here for you and with you.
And with every storm, the hits just kept coming.
There it goes. There it goes. Oh my God.
Oh my God.
Oh, a couch.
From that rare snow here in the Bay Area.
I've never seen this much snow ever.
To the extraordinary winter in the Sierra.
Our First Alert Weather team takes a deep dive into our epic storms.
And looks at the implications for the future. Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us. I'm meteorologist Jessica Birch from CBS News Bay Area Morning Edition.
I'm Darren Peck.
I'm Paul Hagen, and it has certainly been a winter to remember. Over this next half hour, our First Alert Weather team will give you a deeper look at our historic series of storms and the lasting impact on the Bay Area and beyond. So let's dive right in, and we're going to start with an overview of the entire rainy season. 17 different atmospheric rivers hit California over the course of the winter. Almost all of these storms were categorized as weak or moderate, with only 2 events ranking as an AR4 or AR5. These storms primarily occurred in 2 bursts that you can see in the track of daily rainfall since Christmas. The first in late December and the first half of January, and then the second in late February, lasting through most of March. We had a lot of rain to finish 2022 and begin 2023. Then a several-week lull from late January through most of February before the pattern became much more active again. It all added up to one of the 20 wettest water years on record for downtown San Francisco, where record-keeping goes all the way back to the gold rush. This winter's rainfall is almost identical to what added up just 6 years ago, but nowhere near the El Nino winter of 1997-98. Still, it is a huge turnaround from the past couple of winters. But this winter wasn't remarkable just because of the rain. Here's a look back at some of our wildest weather.
Mother Nature sent 2022 out with a bang, with one of our first atmospheric rivers of the season. Just too much to handle. Freeways flooded, and the iconic crab stations at San Francisco's Fisherman's Wharf under 6 to 8 inches of water.
Oh, it's freezing right now. It's freezing to the point that it hurts.
In Danville, first responders had to use surfboards just to get flooded residents out of their homes. And the trouble continued with the next round of storms. Fierce winds toppling over a gas station canopy in Pacifica. In the Santa Cruz Mountains, an aerial view of the devastation after the San Lorenzo River spilled over, putting the entire neighborhood in Felton Grove under several feet of water. Our coastal communities were battered. Ferocious waves left businesses in Capitola in shambles.
You saw all buildings taking damages, glass getting broke out, the walk split in half.
The historic pier destroyed.
We lost a huge section of our wharf area. It had to take a huge hit to do something that damaging.
The damage so severe it prompted a visit by President Biden. In February, more wild weather, but this time something that a lot of us actually enjoyed: snow.
You gotta get your selfie with the snowman. It's the first time I've seen snow up here. We've lived here for 15 years.
We caught people enjoying rare Bay Area winter activities. A snowball fight at Mission Peak near Fremont, and this snowboarder shredding through snow-covered vineyards in Napa Valley. But once March arrived, it brought another series of damaging storms. One led to a levee breach in Monterey County, flooding the entire farming town of Pajaro. Some homes completely unlivable.
All the water got on top. As you can see, all the walls got destroyed.
Here in the Bay Area, a series of devastating wind events. Falling trees killing 5 people, with some of those trees coming down right in front of our cameras.
There it goes. There it goes. Oh my God. Oh.
The winds so fierce, they blew out windows from high-rises in San Francisco, even tossing a couch from a patio onto the street below. And this parade of storms meant repeated and prolonged power outages.
There's no light, so there's no refrigeration. There's no way to take a shower because the water heater is electrically operated. No way to prepare food. The refrigerator, once again, the food's going to spoil.
It's not just that this winter was extreme from a rainfall standpoint.
It's that it came fast on the heels of the other extreme. Remember, right before this winter, we were in the depths of the deepest drought on record. And that kind of fast reversal, like flipping a switch, is something the climate community is calling weather whiplash. And they're also telling us California should expect this to become more common and more extreme in a warmer climate. Let's take a look at this first from both sides. The wet side overwhelmingly is controlled by atmospheric rivers. They're the most important driver in any winter in California in terms of how much rain we're going to get. They deliver the bulk of it. And just a quick review on that. With all of the atmospheric rivers we had and covered this winter, it's important to take just another detailed look at them. They're concentrated ribbons of water vapor that get pulled across the Pacific from thousands of miles away. And when they come our way, it's important to look underneath the hood on one of these, just to kind of come away with two, I think, explanations. First of all, an average atmospheric river can transport as much as 25 Mississippi rivers. It's a tremendous amount of water being transported above our heads. We don't get all of that water, obviously, but it's important to know the fuel it has available to it. And then the other combination to look at is the one in red down there. You see where it says integrated vapor transport. That's how we measure these things. So we don't just measure the water vapor. We measure how fast it's moving. It's the vapor transport, the wind that's transporting these things across the Pacific, because that gives it that much more energy, like with the Santa Cruz Mountains. When it gets here, they hit the Santa Cruz Mountains, and that wind drives those updrafts, and you can get a lot more rain. That's why the Santa Cruz Mountains had such a difficult go this winter, because several of these were oriented to come in just at their latitude and hit them at just the right angle. But we had 16 of these hit California this winter. That's on overdrive. The average would be about 3 to 5 atmospheric rivers, perhaps, in any given winter. That's where we'd like them to be. That'd be great. We don't want to overdo it like we did this winter. Here's the other extreme. When we were in the depths of the drought in 2021, we barely got any. They all went to the Pacific Northwest. This is a perfect example of how California, it's either all or nothing. And when we got nothing in 2021, we found ourselves at the deepest end of the drought. That's what the drought monitor looked like in September of 2021, which, by the way, that's what we looked like from space in September 21. Dixie Fire, Caldor Fire, this was all smoke. And that's one of the consequences we know all too well about the dry side of the whiplash. Here's what we look like today. That's March 2023, where we're now looking at, instead of smoke, we're looking at the deepest snow in history, statewide. California's always done this. California has always gone back and forth from one extreme to the other. We very rarely ever hit average. And this map is a beautiful depiction of that. The deeper you are into the shades of blue and green, the more wildly your winter will swing around average. If you get into the deep shades of blue to black, you can expect your winter to be off the mark by 70%. Meaning you either get 70% above average for rain or 70% below average. Nowhere else in the country does that. Very few places in the world do that. If you look at the rest of the country, for the area shaded in pink, there's like a 10-degree spread. You can usually expect to be close to average, not here in California. We've always done that. But what the climate science is telling us now, in a warmer climate, we can expect that to become even more extreme. In other words, the winter winters become even more extreme on the wet side. The dry winters are going to become more dry on the dry side. And the one over here shows you the most interesting one. The whiplash is also going to increase, meaning the fast turnaround from one extreme to the other.
And when it comes to that whiplash, going from one extreme to another, Sonoma County reservoirs tell the whole story. Our Wilson Walker gives us a look.
Well, we picked this ramp because my understanding was at least a week ago, Yorty Creek was closed because the parking lot was completely underwater.
If you wanted to measure California's change of water fortunes, the boat ramp at Lake Sonoma would be one place to do it. It's the scene of an incredible 4-month turnaround for the very water system where the drought officially started.
That the hots are getting a lot hotter in this state. The dries are getting a lot drier.
As you recall, 3 years ago, the governor literally was up in Lake Mendocino declaring the start of the drought, basically April 2021.
And things only got worse from there as storage dwindled and restrictions piled up.
From a water supply standpoint, our message is still, we're in a drought. We need to make the best use of every drop that we have.
Lake Sonoma would hit an all-time low in November of last year, with concern mounting over what another dry year might mean. And then it started raining.
It's remarkable.
In March, the Army Corps of Engineers started spilling water to make room for subsequent storms. And some drought lessons are already paying off. 10 years of research and planning has produced new control guidelines for many California reservoirs. The idea is to be more flexible and store more water for less rainy days, something they are already doing here.
And there's a significant amount of water they're actually holding back as a result of our improvements in storm predictions and atmospheric river research.
Wow. Unbelievable.
Lake Mendocino is also back to full water supply pool, a huge relief for this region and something a lot of people have to see for themselves.
Wow, I love it. We live in Santa Rosa, the fire danger, all that. I mean, we had to come up and take a look because we know it was going to be just a pleasant sight to see, and it is awesome.
Over the past 3 years, we kept hearing that one big winter could provide so much help for us, but given the deficits we were facing, it became increasingly difficult to wrap your mind around the idea of that happening. But here we are. It's a great example of what can happen in a land of extremes. And for Sonoma County and much of California, it's a water comeback that people will talk about for a long time.
This has been one of the snowiest seasons in the Sierra on record. And while that may sound like every skier's dream, at times all that snow and the wind, it was too much for even the ski resorts to handle. Getting up to the mountains has also been a challenge this winter, with whiteout conditions at times. And even if you did make it up, navigating around the mountains, not easy, with roads surrounded by a wall of snow up to 30 feet high. Homes were buried, and in some cases, residents were stranded inside. And all of this creating quite a hazard, with some buildings even collapsing under the weight of all of that snow. But all of that snowfall is great news for our water supply. State officials just conducted their snow survey for this month. Oh, the Sierra Nevada, a Spanish name that means snowy mountain range, and this year was exceptionally snowy thanks to 17 atmospheric rivers that hit the state of California. Now, the latest snowstorm that swept through the Sierra pushed the statewide snowpack to record levels. Today's reading showed California's snowpack was 237% of average, which makes this the highest reading since the snow sensor network was even established. The melting Sierra snow provides anywhere between a third to half of California's water supply. It's often called the frozen reservoir because the Sierra's natural ability to store water. And in the spring, we start to see that snow actually melt. That water that doesn't get absorbed into the ground is called runoff, and it trickles into the mountain streams, which is then fed by rivers and reservoirs, where it's then stored for us to use throughout the dry season. What's more important is the timing of the snowpack melt. We want the runoff to be as late in the season as possible. This way, we can use it during the dry summer months. Now, once we turn off the faucet for the wet season, the new concern, it's going to be the warmer temperatures on the way that could rapidly melt that snowpack and cause flooding. The Department of Water Resources is tracking this, and they're keeping a very close eye to the spring runoff scenarios to ensure that the California water supply will benefit the most from this year's snowpack while still balancing the need for flood control. Even though this storm has dramatically helped the snowpack and the reservoirs too, I mean, look at these numbers, the groundwater basins take a lot longer to recover. Many Californian communities still experience water supply challenges, especially those who rely on groundwater supplies, which have been depleted due to drought. This is why we have to remember to still be conscious of how we use our water here in the Bay Area. By doing this now, we can help create a healthy environment and community as more shifts between wet and dry weather trends will continue in the years to come.
More to come, including a look at what all that snow and rain means for the fire season. We tagged along with some local students, and they're trying to get some of those answers.
And going inside an atmospheric river, we ride with some hurricane hunters as they collect critical scientific data.
Welcome back to our First Alert Weather Special. Wild winter, lasting impact.
Our storms really put California's infrastructure to the test, particularly the state's aging levee system. In Monterey County, it was a levee breach that led to the major flooding in the small farming town of Pajaro. The community is now trying to clean up the mess left behind, but they still have quite a long way to go. The failed levee was actually scheduled to be strengthened just next year. Lawmakers are now asking the Army Corps of Engineers to expedite the repairs. And in Sacramento County, a number of levees breached along the Cosumnes River, flooding low-lying areas, even a freeway. Some experts say our existing infrastructure just isn't designed with the current climate in mind.
The storms also ripped up our roads. You might remember this massive sinkhole. That was on Highway 92. That's on the peninsula. Wow. And the drivers on 680 probably had some costly repairs. The relentless rains led to potholes, slides, closures. Caltrans estimates there are about $640 million in road damage up and down the entire state.
And we've already talked about those intense winds that brought down so many power lines and poles. PG&E estimates since the start of the year, it has replaced almost 6,000 power poles and more than 900 miles of line. That's more than the distance from San Francisco to Los Angeles and back. Crews also removed almost 14,000 trees that damaged the power grid infrastructure.
So how can we better understand and track these atmospheric rivers? NOAA has a special team dedicated to studying these systems, and we got a look aboard one of their jets. This crew conducts 8-hour missions over the Pacific and drops special sensors into the storms to measure wind speed, temperature, pressure, and even other data. That information will help scientists understand how these storms develop. And I want to show you this. I'm a pilot for the California Army National Guard, and on a recent flight, I got a look at the impact from all of the storms from above. And look at these snow-capped mountains out in the Sierra. The question now, will all of the moisture in the ground even make a difference when it comes to our fire season? Our Mary Lee takes a look.
It's incredible to see how green all of our Bay Area hills are right now after so many atmospheric rivers, which have also gotten us out of our drought. I spent the day with fire weather research graduate students at San Jose State University to find out what all of this rain means for the upcoming wildfire season. Grad students Maritza and Mark are loading up their fire weather lab truck and getting ready for their field research. They're a part of San Jose State's Wildfire Interdisciplinary Research Center, and they're letting me come along for the ride.
We are going up to our fuel sampling site on Mount Umunum, which is in the Santa Cruz Mountains.
Every 2 weeks, you can find Maritza and Mark driving up these winding, bumpy roads overlooking stunning green hills.
I have been doing this for quite a long time, since 2016, since I was an undergrad in university.
An hour later, we reached the top of Mount Umunum.
So right now we're going on our way to the site, the Umunum site where we fuel sample. It's a lot more green. There's a lot more plants around.
Maritza and Mark are measuring the moisture content in these plants. The more moisture, the harder it will be for them to catch fire. They're especially interested in chamise and manzanita plants, which grow abundantly here in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Back at San Jose State University, they weigh the plants, then put them in the oven for 24 hours to dry them out, calculating the difference to get the moisture content.
The average fuel moisture content is way higher in comparison to the last 3 years. When we were looking at the graphs. Hopefully it stays that way, but to be determined.
Last month, the moisture content in these Santa Cruz Mountain plants, more than 90 to over 100%. But Maritza warns it doesn't take long for these plants to dry out quickly.
If we didn't get rain for a lot of days, like if it was like really, really hot, like a heat wave, I would say maybe a week. It could get to dangerous levels.
So while our Bay Area hills look lush and green with so much vegetation now, they likely won't stay this way. Drying out in the heat this summer, quickly turning into highly flammable fuels, which could mean an extreme wildfire season to come.
Mary tells us the latest samples from the Santa Cruz Mountains show plants are already starting to lose their moisture, dropping between 10 and 26% in just 2 weeks.
All this wild weather flooded out a lot of California's farms. So what this all means for what you're going to find and how much you're going to pay at the local grocery store now. The series of winter storms inundated our farmlands, and this could all have a big impact on what we see in the grocery stores. California is the leading agricultural state in the U.S., but some farmers are now on pause. Some can't even get their equipment onto the fields because it's just too muddy. And in the Salinas Valley, some are going to have to test the soil to make sure their leafy greens won't get contaminated. And if you take tomatoes, for example, California grows 99% of all the tomatoes that are used for things like processed canned goods and things like that. So pasta and pizza sauces, that could all see the trickle-down impact from this. Bottom line is, the longer farmers have to delay planting, the longer we have to wait for products at the grocery store. But despite the challenges, farmers tell us all this rainfall should be celebrated.
And in the Napa Valley, Wilson Walker takes a look at what all of this rain means for the wine produced in the region.
You know, in 2017, we had something similar. We had a very wet winter after 5 years of drought.
At William Harrison Vineyards and Winery, General Manager Rod Santos is waiting for the season to bust out of these dormant vines.
Got little nodules here where the green growth will pop out.
And after 3 short, dry seasons, he's hoping wine country is about to bust out of the drought.
The biggest issue for us, not only as growers but as winemakers, is that the last 3 vintages have been very short.
But for winemakers and their vines, it's not quite as simple as rainfall totals. A lot of that water has to make it to the right place.
If you look at the reservoirs around the state, things are filling up. That's all good news, but the reservoirs are really for drinking water. Out here, we need the water to penetrate the earth. We've had 3 very dry years in the past 3, so to get out of that, the water really needs to get below the soil, down where the roots of the vine go. That's where the vines look for their water. In a perfect world, we wouldn't use any water on the surface.
So you're trying to make up for 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, that's hard to do, although we've had a lot of water this year. So
I know we've had smoky years, and people talk about how that might translate into what you taste. Does a wet winter translate into something you're going to notice in a glass of wine?
I think what it does is it relaxes the vines. They know they're not going to be as stressed looking for water. So they tend to give us a little more fruit, as you'd expect. A little more water equals more juice. But also, if it doesn't get too hot, they tend to give us a little juicier flavors, a little easier to drink wines when they're younger. It's farming. At the end of the day, the wine business is all about farm.
So there you go. Hope that one blockbuster winter can assuage the drought stress for these vines. And as you heard, vines that are relaxed tend to give us more wine, juicier flavors. And hasn't California earned that after the last 3 years?
Well, as we look back at our wild winter, we're also going to look ahead at what next winter might bring. That's coming up next.
Now, rain or shine, we want to remind you that your First Alert weather team is always here to bring you the most up-to-date forecast. We use state-of-the-art technology so that you can stay on top of the changing weather and plan ahead. You can find us anytime on KPIX.com or streaming on the CBS News app.
This winter's stormy pattern did have a remarkable positive impact on the long-term drought situation. This is what the U.S. Drought Monitor map looked like at the beginning of the water year on October 1st. And this is what the Drought Monitor map looks like now. Drought conditions have been erased from the Bay Area. And statewide, we've gone from 94% in California in severe drought or worse to just 2% of the state at that level. One phenomenon that could play a major factor as we look ahead to next winter is a developing El Nino. The latest outlook from NOAA shows an over 60% chance that El Nino conditions will develop later this year. And many projections indicate it could be a strong El Nino event. People tend to associate El Nino with wetter than normal conditions in California, which is certainly true for Southern California. But here in the Bay Area, we're on the edge of that strong signal toward above average rainfall. Looking back at the historical data, back to 1950, numerous El Nino events are easy to pick out with the red spikes, but there are 5 strong events that stand out. Checking the rainfall data for those particular years, 3 winters would seem to confirm the association between El Nino and wet conditions in the Bay Area. But the other 2 strong El Nino winters were not as impressive. One was near average, and another actually fell significantly short of the normal for the water year. And in fact, the Climate Prediction Center's very long-range outlook for next winter shows a weak signal towards below average rainfall. Data at this range is very preliminary, but the point remains. Just because next winter looks like it will be an El Nino winter does not mean that we're in for a repeat of this winter's turbulent weather. As always, Darren, Jessica, and the entire First Alert team will be here tracking the latest conditions to keep you updated.
to keep you one step ahead.
Thank you for joining us for our special Wild Winter Lasting Impact.
Our First Alert commitment to you is to always keep you informed on our changing weather. See you next time on CBS News Bay Area.